was a cold November night in 1966 when terror took wing over Point Pleasant, West Virginia. On the evening of November 15th, two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallette, were driving near the abandoned TNT area, a remnant of a World War II munitions facility on the outskirts of town. What began as a joyride soon spiraled into something out of a nightmare. In the darkness ahead, they spotted a towering figure, over 7 feet tall, with glowing red eyes and what appeared to be massive leathery wings folded against its back. The creature stood motionless at first, then suddenly unfurled its wings and took flight, chasing their speeding car down the lonely road. Linda, panicked, claimed it kept pace at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. When they finally escaped and returned to town, pale and shaken, they reported the incident to the local police. Word spread quickly. The media seized on the story, dubbing the creature the Mothman, inspired by a villain from the then-popular Batman television series. But what began as a strange report soon unraveled into something much bigger: a flood of sightings, a rising tide of fear, and a tragic disaster that would cement Mothman's legacy forever. This was no hoax. This was the beginning of one of America's most enduring paranormal mysteries. As reports flooded in after the initial sighting, a consistent and deeply unsettling portrait of the creature began to emerge, one that defied logic and left even the most level-headed locals shaken. Witnesses described a humanoid figure standing between 6 and 7 feet tall, with enormous wings that spanned nearly 10 feet across. But it wasn't just the size that terrified them, it was what they couldn't see. The creature seemed to lack a distinct head. Its glowing red eyes were set deep in its chest, as if staring out from within the body itself. And those eyes, nearly every witness would describe them the same way: burning, hypnotic, paralyzing. Some said the eyes radiated a psychic dread, a kind of primal fear that pierced straight to the core. These were not the ravings of thrill-seekers or the unwell. Many were credible townspeople, volunteer firefighters, teachers, factory workers, and even deputy sheriffs, all reporting eerily similar encounters. One fireman described it as a bird-like man with red eyes, big as bicycle reflectors. Another man claimed that just locking eyes with the creature caused him to feel disoriented, even ill. Despite the terror it inspired, the Mothman never attacked. It seemed to appear, observe, and vanish, leaving behind confusion, fear, and a growing sense that something was very, very wrong in Point Pleasant. The name Mothman stuck, a strange moniker for an even stranger presence. But for the people of West Virginia, this was no comic book villain. It was real, and it was just the beginning. The encounter on November 15th, 1966, lit a fire of paranoia that would burn for the next 13 months. But it wasn't an isolated incident. What followed was a chilling wave of sightings, each stranger and more unsettling than the last. Just days before the now famous couple's sighting, a group of grave diggers in nearby Clendenin, West Virginia, claimed to see a brown human being fly out from the trees and over their heads. They were so disturbed that they stopped work and fled the cemetery. Back in Point Pleasant, a man named Newell Partridge reported something even more bizarre. While watching TV one night, his screen filled with static and a loud whining noise. Stepping outside to investigate, he saw two glowing red eyes in the darkness, eyes that seemed fixed on him. His German Shepherd, Bandit, ran into the field and was never seen again. Partridge was convinced the creature had taken him. In the weeks that followed, dozens of residents reported similar encounters, often centered around the abandoned TNT area. an old World War II munitions site turned overgrown, shadowy ruin. Locals spoke of hearing eerie shrieks, seeing massive winged shapes perched atop buildings, and even being followed at night by the creature. The panic escalated quickly. Newspaper headlines screamed, "Couples see man-sized bird. Creature. Something." People began to avoid driving near the TNT area after dark. Sightings spilled over into Ohio and even across the state line, as if something larger was stirring. By late 1966, the local sheriff's department was holding press conferences, trying to calm the public while also confirming they had received credible, consistent reports. And throughout 1967, the sightings continued, sometimes fleeting, sometimes terrifyingly close. In one case, a woman reported the creature outside her window, peering in. It wasn't just a local curiosity anymore. Point Pleasant was becoming something darker, a town haunted not just by fear, but by the sense that something was building, something no one could explain, and no one could stop. On December 15, 1967, just over a year after the first Mothman sighting, tragedy struck Point Pleasant in a way no one could have imagined, or perhaps some believed had been foretold. At approximately 5:04 p.m. during the height of rush hour, the Silver Bridge, which connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to Gallipolis, Ohio, suddenly collapsed into the frigid Ohio River. In less than a minute, 31 vehicles plunged into the icy water. 46 people lost their lives. It was one of the deadliest bridge disasters in American history. The cause, as determined later by investigators, was a failure in a single eye bar, a tiny defect in a metal link that had gone unnoticed. It snapped, the chain reaction began, and the entire structure fell apart like a house of cards. But for the people of Point Pleasant, that explanation didn't feel like the whole story. What shook the town more than anything was the timing. The sightings of the Mothman, which had been constant for over a year, ceased entirely after the bridge collapse. No more red eyes, no more wings in the dark, just silence. That eerie coincidence gave rise to the legend. Was the Mothman a harbinger of doom? An omen trying to warn the town of its impending disaster? Or something even darker, a catalyst somehow connected to the tragedy itself? Locals began to retell stories through a new lens. Those haunting red eyes? Maybe they weren't hunting. Maybe they were watching, trying to alert those who saw them. Or maybe, as some whispered, the creature had fulfilled its grim purpose and simply disappeared. From that day on, the Mothman was no longer just a strange local cryptid. It became a symbol of catastrophe, a specter tied to death and loss. And in Point Pleasant, the Silver Bridge wasn't just a collapsed structure. It was a monument to a warning unheeded and to the price of mystery. As the legend of the Mothman took root in American folklore, investigators, skeptics, and believers alike began searching for answers. Was it all a mistake, a mass delusion? Or did something genuinely unexplained haunt the skies of Point Pleasant? Misidentified sandhill, crane, or owl? One of the most cited natural explanations points to a large bird, specifically the sandhill crane. These birds have a wingspan up to 7 feet, stand as tall as a human, and feature patches of red skin around their eyes. Ornithologists speculated that a crane may have wandered out of its normal migratory path and startled residents unfamiliar with its size and appearance. Another candidate, the barn owl. Known for its eerie screech and reflective red-orange eyes when caught in headlights, an owl startled into flight at night could certainly frighten witnesses, especially if adrenaline and fear exaggerated the sighting. But many locals dismissed this theory outright. Witnesses consistently described a creature far larger than any bird, with a humanoid form, a wingspan approaching 10 feet, and a terror-inducing gaze that caused physical paralysis or nausea. "It wasn't a bird," said more than one eyewitness. "It was watching me. It knew I was there." Mass hysteria and the power of folklore. Psychologists and sociologists suggest that the Mothman phenomenon may have been a case of mass hysteria, where shared anxiety or fear causes groups to experience similar hallucinations or exaggerated perceptions. The media played a huge role. After the first sighting made the front page, more reports flooded in. A catchy name, Mothman, inspired by a Batman villain, helped the legend spread. Fear became contagious, and soon people saw what they were primed to expect. Author and journalist John Keel, who visited Point Pleasant during the height of the sightings, chronicled these events in his 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies. But Keel didn't stop at hysteria. He connected Mothman to a web of paranormal events, UFO sightings, electronic interference, and the arrival of ominous, silent figures in black suits. He suggested that ultra-terrestrials, beings not from space but from other dimensions, might be behind it all. To Keel, Mothman wasn't a monster, but a warning system, appearing before disasters to either observe or warn. Supernatural omen and indigenous legends. To many residents, especially those steeped in local lore, the scientific explanations fell short. They embraced a more spiritual or supernatural interpretation. Some linked the Mothman to indigenous legends, like the Shawnees Thunderbirds, powerful sky beings associated with storms and vengeance. Others pointed to the story of Chief Cornstalk, a Shawnee leader murdered in Point Pleasant in 1777. Local legend holds that with his dying breath, he cursed the land. Could the Mothman be a manifestation of that curse, a guardian spirit watching over the region, or an eternal echo of the land's violent past? While these ideas aren't backed by science, they endure. Not because they're proven, but because they give meaning to fear. And sometimes meaning is more powerful than explanation. More than half a century has passed since those red eyes first glowed in the dark woods of Point Pleasant. Yet, the Mothman legend refuses to fade. In fact, it's only grown stronger, from a chilling local tale to a global pop culture phenomenon. A town transformed by a monster. Point Pleasant has fully embraced its eerie fame. In the heart of town stands a 12-foot-tall stainless steel statue of the Mothman, wings spread wide, eyes glowing crimson. Tourists flock year-round to pose beneath it, a symbol that fear, mystery, and folklore can evolve into identity. Across the street lies the Mothman Museum, filled with eyewitness interviews, news clippings, Keel's notebooks, and memorabilia from the 2002 Hollywood adaptation, The Mothman Prophecies, starring Richard Gere. The museum is part archive, part shrine, and part tourist trap, but no less captivating for it. The Mothman Festival. Each September, the town hosts the Mothman Festival, drawing thousands of visitors, cryptid hunters, and paranormal enthusiasts. There are cosplay contests, speaker panels on UFOs and the unexplained, and even TNT area bus tours to the original sighting locations. The creature that once struck terror now brings economic life to the town. It's a curious transformation, from omen of death to mascot of curiosity and community. From myth to media, beyond Point Pleasant, Mothman has soared through books, documentaries, video games, and podcasts. From Unsolved Mysteries to BuzzFeed Unsolved, he's become an icon in the cryptid pantheon, alongside Bigfoot, Nessie, and Chupacabra. But unlike many cryptids, the Mothman isn't just a monster. He's become something more symbolic, a manifestation of anxiety, a warning figure, a mirror of our fears. Whether appearing before the collapse of a bridge or the explosion of a nuclear plant, he's less creature and more concept, the shape that dread takes before disaster strikes. Although the original Point Pleasant flap ended abruptly after the Silver Bridge collapse in 1967, the Mothman legend didn't die. It migrated. Chernobyl, 1986. One of the most chilling alleged reappearances came in the Soviet Union. In the months leading up to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, workers at the plant in Pripyat claimed to see a strange winged humanoid flying above the reactor. They described glowing red eyes and dreams of disaster. Then, on April 26, 1986, the worst nuclear accident in history occurred. These reports were never officially verified, and skeptics argue they surfaced retroactively, influenced by the rising popularity of the Mothman story. But to believers, it was history repeating itself, 9/11, and beyond. Other alleged appearances include sightings near the Twin Towers before the 9/11 attacks, and in Fukushima, Japan, prior to the 2011 tsunami and nuclear meltdown. In each case, a mysterious winged creature was reportedly seen days or weeks before tragedy struck, a pattern that has led many to consider Mothman not as a monster, but as a harbinger. These stories, often unverifiable and anecdotal, continue to fuel online speculation. YouTube channels, Reddit threads, and late-night radio shows like Coast to Coast AM keep the Mothman narrative alive and global. Chicago Wave 2017 to 2021. Between 20 and 21, dozens of sightings emerged in the Chicago area, particularly near O'Hare International Airport. Witnesses described large winged figures with leathery skin and piercing red eyes. Some reports came from pilots, truckers, and even airport security staff, people not easily dismissed as thrill seekers. These encounters sparked investigations by cryptozoologists and led to theories ranging from portal phenomena to ultra-terrestrial presence. The Chicago Mothman quickly became the most concentrated wave of Mothman-like sightings since the 1960s. More than half a century after the first terrified couples sped away from a red-eyed creature in Point Pleasant, the Mothman remains one of the most enduring and unsettling legends in American folklore. Whether seen as a misunderstood bird, a collective psychological phenomenon, or something unexplainable and otherworldly, Mothman refuses to fade. For the residents of Point Pleasant, it's not just a story, it's part of their lived history. The statue, the museum, the festival, all are reminders of a time when fear took wing and perched just beyond the edge of explanation. But beneath the tourist charm and pop culture fascination lies a haunting question. Did the Mothman come to warn us or to witness? Was it a creature of flesh and blood, a spiritual omen, a being drawn to trauma, or perhaps one that somehow precedes it? As new sightings continue to surface across the world, often near sites of disaster, one cannot help but wonder, if you saw glowing red eyes in the darkness, would you turn back? The legend endures because the question remains unanswered, and perhaps that's what keeps us watching the skies.